Former VP candidate Sarah Palin called your movement to bring a lawsuit up against the president, bringing a lawsuit to a gunfight, that actually President Obama should be impeached. What's your response to Governor Palin?
I disagree.
What about the folks in your conference who are calling for privately talk about impeachment?
I disagree.
Not a day goes by as we speed toward the midterms and the presidential race in 2016 that we don't hear about another skirmish between warring factions. And we don't mean the Republicans and Democrats. This would be the sniping going on between the Tea Party and the Republican establishment. It will either split the party further, or plenty believe it could bring the Republicans actually together. Let the introspection begin then. Welcome into MidPoint, former member of the House of Representatives from 1980 to 2005, sent to Washington by the people of the 3rd Congressional District in Louisiana. Billy Tauzin joins us today. Billy, thanks so much for being here.
Hey, good to be with you, Ed.
When did this all happen? Because there are people who are asking, hang on a sec, isn't the Tea Party supposed to be part of the Republicans? And yet here we have this Grand Canyon-esque divide sometimes between the two sides.
Yeah, I think it's happened because we polarized the districts in America into very hard right and hard left districts. And so the skirmish, the fight is in the primaries now between whether you're conservative enough or whether you're liberal enough. And the Tea Party's emerged, as you know, some time ago as sort of a reaction to the abuses in the IRS and the tax code. So I'm suggesting there's a lot of room for agreement here rather than fighting. You know?
So then where did that actually, you mentioned, of course, the IRS and several things here, but this split that happened had to happen over something else, because it seems to many people that the Tea Party still doesn't see their needs being taken care of by the established part of the Republican Party here. So how did that grow so wide so fast?
I think it was a reaction to the first Republican majority that emerged in the early 1990s. And after it had been in office for some time, there was a feeling among a lot of Republican conservatives that Republicans were acting too much like Democrats. They were spending money like crazy. They were, earmarking a lot of money. I was around during that period, so I'll do some mea culpas. The bottom line is that folks in the Republican Party on the right, who call themselves Tea Partiers because we had encouraged them to form Tea Parties across America to get rid of the income tax code, replace it with something fair, they started to realize that, well, the Republican Party is looking too much like the Democratic Party. Maybe we need to challenge it. That's not always bad, as long as you remember you all stand for the same primary goals about limited government and more freedom.
All right, now there it is, primary goals, and I think that's where we need to start. But are those primary goals perhaps not being met or weren't met because of generational issues? And I say that only because there are a number of people that certainly sit in the Tea Party and say, and I'm going to be very frank here, they'll say, wait a minute, the Republican Party, you're just a bunch of old white guys anymore, and you do not understand what we need to do here in the 2010s and the 21st century. You're still living back in the 1980s, and that's why we're not getting along. That simple?
I think that's a little general. I think it really gets down to whether or not the government in Washington, which Republicans generally find very suspicious, it taxes us too much, it regulates our lives too much, whether the government can be trusted to fix those problems, and whether the people we send to Washington, I included, did a good enough job of fixing it, or are things getting worse. And as long as things are getting worse, the suspicion is, no matter who we send up there, they don't make any good changes. So that I think there's frustration with the fact that government gets bigger, taxes get bigger, regulations become more burdensome, and nobody seems to be able to turn it around.
According to TeaParty.org, the platform centers around this, and I'm going to quote, those who possess a strong belief in the foundational Judeo-Christian values embedded in our great founding documents, unquote. Is that just a hard line right there? Is that one of the things that gets in the way, that the Tea Party says, this is it, Judeo-Christian values or nothing?
Well, it could be, but I don't think it's just that. I think when you think about it, the Tea Partiers are very patriotic. They love the country. They're fundamental about the Constitution and the rights of citizens over the rights of government. And they see, their friends in the same party going to Washington and becoming part of the government. And it bothers them. I get that. I think we all get that. The truth is, however, we're not going to succeed if the more liberal wing of the House and the Senate are really in charge. We have to have a conservative majority if we're going to make the kind of changes that Tea Party members want.
Certainly a conservative professional that was sitting in power for so long was Eric Cantor. Many people believe that he was going to be there for a long period of time. Loses to Dave Bratt in a major upset here. Now, in your opinion, was this a Tea Party standard Republican rift or something more? Because if you dig down into it, there's still people saying that the reason he lost was because he lost his local. He lost his people, not that he lost the party.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, Eric became part of the leadership. Good guy, conservative enough, I think, for most Tea Party guys. But I think he lost touch locally. You know, Tip O'Neill was so right when he said that all politics are local. You had better stay closely in touch with all the folks at home, and you had better remember that it's their job, not yours. You just borrow it for 2 years, and they can replace you anytime that they feel you're out of touch. I think it was part of it. The other thing, keep in mind, we have really polarized America. We've made super minority districts and super majority districts all over the country. And there are very few diverse districts anymore. So that what's happening is the general election is not where we have big fights anymore. It's in the primaries. It's whether or not in that conservative district, people are satisfied that you're conservative enough, that you're effective enough, that you stay in touch enough with the folks who sent you there. That's, I kind of think, explains the election in Cantor's district.
Then if we are a polarized America, and I agree with you completely, we certainly are, how do we start at least trying to fix it?
Well, let's face the fact. We've gummed it up with our gerrymandering, these super minority districts. I think we need to focus more on diversity districts. You know, when I was in Congress, I represented a very diverse district in Cajun country. And I served very effectively, I think, as a Democrat and as a Republican. I served in the leadership of both parties. Never had a partisan opponent. As a Republican, never had a Democratic opponent. As a Democrat, never had a Republican opponent. Because in effect, we had a diverse district and we could work together inside that district. Today, if you satisfy your polarized district, it makes it very hard for you to cooperate with others who are satisfying their very polarized district. We got to think about that. We need more diversity districts within our country instead of these polarized ones.
I have to bring up, when we talk about polarizing here and polarizing factions, Sarah Palin is certainly someone that sits out there that is a Tea Party darling in many ways, and there are many people who are big fans of the former vice presidential candidate. But as you heard at the beginning of this segment, there are things that Sarah Palin is saying John Boehner certainly doesn't agree with. I'll be very honest with you here. There are some people who really wish that Sarah would just stop talking, that she is not good for bringing the two sides together at this point. Your opinion here, when she comes out and says things, and she really doesn't have to answer to anybody at this point, simply being a private citizen out there, is it good for bringing Republicans and Tea Partyists together?
Well, no. I mean, anything that divides us within the Republican Party is, in the end, not very good. And I would agree with you that, you know, calling for impeachment when then that's not in the interest of the Republican Party. That's not going to happen to start with. It's a bad tactic and a bad request. I agree with you. That's wrong. But the way you solve that is by focusing on the things you have in common. And I've tried to cite a few. I mean, everybody I know in the Tea Party movement is upset about overregulation. They're upset about the tax code and the abusive powers of the IRS. They'd love to see, as Reagan tried to give us, a simple, fair tax code. Why don't we focus on those? Why don't we have a national discussion where Tea Party guys and Republican traditional guys and gals are all talking about those issues that hold us together as a party? Because if we don't, we never win. We can't accomplish those goals.
I got about 45 seconds left or so. Is Rand Paul an answer to bringing people together?
You know, Rand is interesting because as a libertarian, which is sort of a conservative who says, don't worry about social issues. You know, leave people alone to make their own judgments about those things. I think Rand represents a lot of the young Republicans I talk to across America. They would like to see the party focus more on the conservative issues that trouble them about government getting too involved in their lives, too regulatory, too burdensome. They want to talk about freedom. They want more personal freedom and less government intervention in their lives. Rand Paul represents that very effectively, even better than his dad did, I think. And he catches a lot of young Republican attention.
I've got about 15 seconds here. Are you optimistic that Republicans can get their act together for midterms and beyond?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the country recognizes we're very much on the wrong track. They want to get back on the right track rather. And I think they're going to insist that we get our act together and we pull together as a team. Otherwise, we're going to stay on that bad track.
I think you're exactly right. They're going to insist it sooner or later. Former Congressman Billy Tauzin, thanks so much for joining us here today. Have a wonderful weekend. Let's do it again.
Thank you, Ed. Do it again.
All right, we absolutely will. He brings up some great points. That's all it is. It is a group of people that supposedly stand for the same things, and they just can't seem to get it together. Time is short, trust me. Next up, the deepening mystery in Ukraine over Malaysia Flight 17, how the world is looking at this tragedy. You tell us what you think about everything we talk about. We answer back. And we answer back by bringing you News Call and MidPoint, where every day we question everything.